And so what happens is that President Obama is presiding over what amounts to the way that like a dictatorship would decide the deaths of people, or an emperor. I think that Bashar al-Assad is a war criminal, and I would love to see him prosecuted, but only if, Donald Rumsfeld is down the hall from him at The Hague.
Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown on over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, and on the internet at thestruggle.org. Today we feature a talk by journalist Jeremy Scahill. He spoke in New Haven at a celebration for the 25th anniversary for the radio program Between the Lines, which is broadcast on scores of radio stations around the country. Scahill worked on Democracy Now! For many years. Now he writes for The Intercept. He wrote the award-winning study of the private mercenary army, Blackwater. His book, Dirty Wars, was made into a film that was nominated for an Oscar. His newest book is called The Assassination Complex.
In terms of drone strikes and the assassination program, in the book that we published recently, The Assassination Complex, which is based on scores of secret and top secret documents that we obtained from a whistleblower within the U.S. intelligence community who worked on the assassination program. It was the first leak of documents pertaining to the drone program ever. What it shows is what we call the kill chain, which is really the banal bureaucracy of how individuals through a secret process are put on a kill list and then executed on orders of the President of the United States. And if you look in the book or online at the chart of that, Hillary Clinton, when she was Secretary of State, was right below the President in determining who should be on the list or not on the list and clearing it. She played a direct role in that process. What they built under the Obama administration is tantamount to a parallel extrajudicial judicial system where the President and his advisors are going over what they call baseball cards. That's literally what they call them. Statistics on who this person is, what networks are they connected to, where are they geographically, what groups have they been a part of, who are their known associates, and they debate whether or not these individuals should be placed on the kill list, and then they make recommendations to the cabinet, and Hillary Clinton was one of the key people in that, and then they make those recommendations based on that to the President, who then signs their death warrant. And so what happens is that President Obama is presiding over what amounts to the way that like a dictatorship would decide the deaths of people, or an emperor, because there is no due process, there is no criminal indictment, there is no attempt to surrender or offer an attempt to surrender. You can't know if you're on the kill list, and the only way that we've determined that you actually can get off of it is when you are killed in a raid, or more commonly in a drone strike. And and I think that we would not, if McCain had won the election in 2008 or Romney in 2012, I don't think we would have seen liberals celebrating this as kind of an innovative, smarter way of waging what is called America's counterterrorism policy or national security policy. I think people's intellectual honesty would have sort of surfaced at some point, and they would have said, you know what, there is no such thing as a Democratic or a Republican hellfire missile. This doesn't make sense. Does the nation have a right to defend itself? Yes. Are we defending ourselves in the vast majority of these drone strikes, the overwhelming majority? No. We're engaged in an offensive war where we have asserted our right to preemptively kill people that we believe may one day join a terrorist organization. And there are documents you can read in our book, but also elsewhere online now, that show that the Justice Department, in rationalizing the legality of this for President Obama, altered the definition of terms like imminence to such a degree that even someone with a base familiarity with the English language would not recognize the definition of the word imminence. It's basically someone who's ever had a thought about terrorism in their life can be determined to be an ongoing imminent threat to the United States. That basically is the standard that they've come up with. And on the one hand, you can say, well, the authorization for the use of military force that was passed by Congress in the aftermath of 9/11, only one lawmaker voted against it, Representative Barbara Lee of California. Everyone should watch that speech. She was totally right in everything that she said, and she received death threats and was maligned by members of her own party as well. I mean, imagine being her, a month after these heinous attacks, being the person that stands up and says, no, I don't want to vote for the forever war, when all of the most reprehensible people from both sides, and then a lot of really good people in the middle were all sort of singing banging on the war drums. She stands up and says, this will be a forever war, we won't be able to stop it, it's going to create more terrorism. Incredibly brilliant and prophetic statement by her. But that was passed supposedly to respond to the 9/11 attacks, and it's 60 words, the authorization for the use of military force, and basically what it says is anyone who was in any way connected to the 9/11 attacks, is fair game. It was a blank check. But they're killing people now who were toddlers when 9/11 happened. And so they've stretched the meaning of it so wide. And what Obama has said, and if you really have to read carefully his speeches, but the rationalization and the justification for continuing to do these strikes in places where we don't have any kind of a declared war or a congressional authorization is that Article 2 of the Constitution, which they call the Commander-in-Chief Clause, is all that Obama needs. That is a very radical idea that Cheney and Rumsfeld, when they were in Gerald Ford's administration, championed. The idea that when it comes to national security policy, there should effectively be a dictatorship of the executive branch. And those two guys were obsessed with with some of the Federalist Papers on the unitary executive, on the idea that Congress's only function when it comes to setting national defense policy should be to fund the actions required by the president. That's their radical view of the world. And it has been co-signed to a great extent now by the constitutional law scholar, transformative anti-war president who won the Nobel Peace Prize. He has solidified and sought to use his credibility, or has used his credibility, to try to legitimize this to liberal Democrats. And that is a really disturbing reality we find ourselves in right now. Obama recently gave an interview to Jonathan Chait in which he said, he thanked the left for pressuring him so much on the issue of drones, and that it, really kept him up at night, but it was right what he did. And he said, and now I think I should probably put some rules in place so that whoever comes after me, has to follow these. Well, where were your rules? Where were the open hearings on this? Why was it that the first time that any president mentioned drone strikes at all was Obama joking about killing the Jonas Brothers at the White House Correspondents Association dinner if they came near Sasha or Malia? It took him 5-6 years into his time as president to actually give a public speech about drones. And they have created a sort of industry now for extrajudicial assassination. They call it the disposition matrix. They meet on Tuesdays. They go over who's going to live and die. There are no courts involved. There are no lawyers involved. There is no surrender opportunity offered. And this is under a Democratic administration. And so, when we do have a Republican next time in office, and I would put Hillary in that category on foreign policy, are people actually going to say anything about this? Are we okay with the president having emperor-like policies? Because I'll tell you this, we learned this from the Blackwater stuff and all sorts of U.S. history. What we do around the world ultimately comes home. What we're seeing right now in black communities and immigrant communities and poor communities across this country is a paramilitarization of what is called law enforcement, where every time people protest against the killing of unarmed black men or of other people that are killed in an extrajudicial manner by the police or killed under questionable circumstances or beaten in a wagon and then their spine gets severed, somehow they did it themselves according to the justice system. When these things happen and people rise up, they are then met with military-style crowd suppression operations. And where is all that equipment coming from? Well, part of it is just what the SWATification of law enforcement has looked like in this country. But the Department of Homeland Security has a program where state and local law enforcement agencies can apply for military equipment that was used in Iraq or Afghanistan or elsewhere to have for their use on the streets of U.S. cities. They are using spy technology that was developed by the NSA, the CIA, and the Defense Department for what they call tracking and whacking, tracking terror suspects and then whacking them with a drone, something that basically uses your mobile phone as a homing device by tricking your phone into believing that it's on a network stronger than the one that it's already on, so it switches over to it. They're using that technology now in local municipalities in the United States to try to track people who are accused of common crimes, including not paying child support or accused of selling drugs. Now, it's not that I'm supporting somebody selling drugs, well, certain kinds of drugs, but not, not dangerous drugs. And I definitely want people to pay child support. But should we be using military gear on the streets of our city that we use to assassinate people around the globe to just police our communities? And what does that mean if we start to accept it? Like, to what extent will we allow this to take place? Do we think that we should use an armed drone to kill a suspect who is fleeing across state lines? Do we think it's fine occasionally to assassinate someone who is an elusive criminal that we think, if we give them a trial, our agents could look bad? Or an FBI informant. The FBI has a PhD in breaking up its own plots in Muslim communities in this country. If we don't want people to go on trial because of what they're going to say, why don't we just bump them off? It's what they did with Osama bin Laden. It's what they did with Anwar al-Awlaki. Anyone who thinks that bin Laden was somehow killed in a firefight is living in la la land. There was no intent to capture Osama bin Laden, none whatsoever. Hillary Clinton knows that. Hillary Clinton was there that night. Hillary Clinton knows exactly what happened there. They sent Navy SEALs in there to assassinate Osama bin Laden, and they each took turns just pummeling his body with bullets. That was an assassination. Am I sad that Osama bin Laden is gone? Absolutely not. Was that legal? No, I don't think it was legal. Was it immoral? Yeah, I think it was immoral. Because you don't test your principles based on people you like who accidentally get killed. You test them based on how you treat the most reprehensible people in your society. And if we say that we're a nation of laws and that we believe in the right to due process, then we have to believe in that too for someone who's sleeping in the middle of his night, even if he is a horrifying terrorist. We don't just go in and murder someone in the middle of the night in their bed and then say, we're the greatest nation on earth. So if we want to have a real debate about who we are, we don't debate the death penalty over someone who is innocent. You debate it, if you're really against it, you debate it over a horrible child murderer and rapist. Are you really against the death penalty for that person? That's where your principle is tested. And these are tough questions. And that's why we need independent media. It's why we need Between the Lines radio. It's why Democracy Now! Still I listed as my university. It's what we're trying to do at The Intercept. But sometimes you have to make tough decisions, or you stake out a position that is going to get you attacked or called a terrorist sympathizer because you actually are saying, wait a minute, if they do this to these people that we all agree are terrible, where's the standard? And what if it starts slipping down? And what if it starts, as it's happened in our history before, being used to go after dissidents? A Trump-Pence regime could look like that. It could look like taking all of what Obama has told us he carefully, only unleashes against horrible, bad people around the world, and they start to say, well, there's a utilitarian purpose for this politically for us in certain countries. And you sort of take what, the sort of glory days of the CIA, and you mix them together with the empowering that Obama has done of the extrajudicial killing complex, the Joint Special Operations Command, the Navy SEALs, the paramilitarization of the State Department, the paramilitarization of law enforcement inside of the United States, high-tech surveillance gear developed by the military and NSA coming back into the United States. It's not that hard to imagine a world in which a sitting US president decides, yeah, these things are tools available to us to preserve political order in this country or in other countries because it's in our best interests. We already have a Democrat who won the Nobel Prize and is a constitutional law scholar acting like an emperor when it comes to putting a kill list together of certain people around the world. And a lot of people say, well, I trust Obama. That's really stupid politically to just say, oh, I trust that person, because that's not how the presidency works. He's setting a precedent now, and he seems to actually be aware of this way too late, that if he doesn't sort of do something, then it's going to get picked up and run with. We basically have had a coup in this country that doesn't require the military or corporations to collude with each other in a direct manner anymore. Fat white guys smoking cigars in the back of the room. The coup is that both parties have embraced the idea that the United States has the right to be the policeman of the world, and it should not be subjected to the same standards as other governments or other nation states, that we don't have to abide by the norms of international law when we say it's against our national interests. We don't have to ratify an international criminal court. We can just call for prosecution of Rwandans and Serbs and Croats and others, but never subject our own forces to it. We have the right to change regimes the world over, to fund death squads, including those that may come back to hit us later. And who benefits from all of this? The average American? No. The average Yemeni, who are being massacred right now by the Saudis with the full support and arming of the United States? No. Ordinary people don't benefit from any of this. Corporations benefit from it. At the end of the day, they always have a new toy that we just have to use. We've got a drone now the size of a bee, and I think we can attach a laser to it. Why should we even send human beings anymore into war? We can do it with these robots. These corporations, they're feeding a beast with an insatiable appetite, because the beast lives on a pipeline, IV into its arm that is full of campaign contributions. Congress is not going to ask a question to which it doesn't want the answer. There is no law in this country prohibiting the United States from assassinating people around the globe. A lot of people think there is, but they're wrong. There was an executive order that was issued for the first time under President Gerald Ford. And why did Gerald Ford do that? He was not some radical leftist. He certainly wasn't against the United States bumping people off around the world. Ford did it because of the House committee that was investigating political assassinations, and there was a huge uproar in the U.S. House and the Senate. And there was an imposition of the intelligence committees at that time. That was viewed by the CIA as the single greatest threat to its existence since the agency had been formed 2 decades earlier. And so what Ford did, with the assistance of Cheney and Rumsfeld, was to come up with an idea that would allow the United States to continue doing all of the things that Congress was supposedly investigating, while at the same time saying we don't do those things. So they decided that rather than having a bill in the Congress that would legislate the issue of assassination, we'll issue an executive order saying that the United States does not assassinate, but we'll never define the term assassinate. And so every president assassinates or orders assassinations, but they'll always say it's something else: a targeted leadership strike, a targeted killing. That they'll say we're in a contingency operation, and these individuals represented an imminent threat, therefore they were combatants. There's always a way around it. Every president since Ford has upheld that executive order, including President Obama. Jimmy Carter edited it or amended it to add that he took out the word political assassinations. He took out the word political, which was good, and then he added that it also applied to contractors working on behalf of the United States. But the point is, it's never had teeth. And the efforts, and there is actually a legislative history of this, the efforts of people within Congress, lawmakers, to try to legislate this has always been shut down by the leadership of either the Democrats or the Republicans, depending on who's in power at any given time. Because if Congress did legislate it, then they would have to actually examine whether or not the U.S. has a right to kill one of its own citizens who's not on an active battlefield, who hasn't been charged with a terrorism-related crime, who is in the middle of a rural area somewhere. Do we have that right? How is that not assassination? Congress doesn't want to know. And so we now enter 1 month and counting from the next person who's going to take up residence at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, probably with a very empowered Hillary Clinton because of Trump's seeming implosion, who on some levels is far more hawkish than Obama and a much more connected individual coming into the White House than Obama could ever have dreamt of being at the time that he came. In closing, the thing that I want to leave you with is that we now have more choices than ever of what to watch on TV, what to listen to, in terms of podcasts or radio shows. We're inundated with social media. To me, the value of an organization and a show like Between the Lines is that it's never veered from the core mission of not altering itself into fast food journalism, not altering itself into the kind of Ritalin-based culture that is Twitter and Instagram. And I love all of that, but if we lose serious discourse, where you take the time to actually examine issues, the complexities of them, and not just boil it down to what you can say in 140 characters, if we were to lose that, then we're going to lose one of the strongest forces we have for fighting for actual democratic change in this country. And so I end, and we'll take questions or comments, but I end by just saluting the folks at Between the Lines Radio and celebrating the fact that they have never tried to distill the reality around us into 140 characters because that's what's popular to do. They have always been about the business of deep dive, slow cook journalism. And the future, I think, is going to be figuring out a way to merge what's good about new social media and some of the great creative energy we see, especially from a lot of creative young people, with the necessary old school tactics of investigative journalism, getting out there and getting your fingernails dirty because you're out in the field doing the reporting, and not being afraid to take on the most controversial questions because you're afraid people are going to accuse you of being a terrorist or telling you to go back to Russia or what have you. That space, mixing those two things together, I think is going to be the future of necessary, independent, and investigative journalism. And the people that do that right are the people that I think are going to help fuel real change in this country. So thank you and congrats to Between the Lines Radio.
I asked him about Syria.
The issue of Syria, I think, boils down to a classic kind of trap that I think a lot of people on the left have fallen into for years. And it centers around the particular despot or dictator or president or leader that happens to be in power in these countries. And we certainly saw that in the disintegration of Yugoslavia. We've seen that to an extent with certain people's positions on Russia. That happened in a smaller way with Libya. I think that Bashar al-Assad is a war criminal, and I would love to see him prosecuted, but only if, Donald Rumsfeld is down the hall from him at The Hague. And the problem I see is that I don't believe that being against what the United States, and for that matter against what Russia or Iran or Hezbollah or Qatar or Turkey or various factions, some of which may or may not be Al-Qaeda, some of which have gotten funding from the US or from the Special Operations Forces of the United States, that being against all of those is a perfectly acceptable position. And I do not think that Bashar al-Assad is some prized, misunderstood leader. I think he has actively participated in the horrifying criminal destruction of that country. But let's be clear, we, or at least from my perspective, I am from the United States. My priority is going to be to hold the government of this country accountable. And the idea that the United States is debating whether or not to intervene, that Aleppo is somehow Obama's Srebrenica, which is, was in the Wall Street Journal yesterday, a column, is ludicrous. The United States has been intervening in Syria for decades. They intervened in Syria with Hafez al-Assad to allow prisoners to be tortured in Syria that were sent from the United States. Maher Arar, a Canadian citizen who was kidnapped by the CIA at JFK Airport, was sent to Syria for torture at a time when Bush said that Syria was part of an axis of evil. The United States invasion of Iraq destabilized large portions of Syria because of refugee issues. The United States viewed Assad as a better alternative to any number of Islamist movements or organizations that could have taken power or taken control of parts of Syria. So let's not act like the United States was not a part of creating the conditions that led to this. But let's also not pretend that to defend Assad is somehow the anti-imperialist position. I don't buy the notion that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and I think it's a very dangerous road to go down. You can be against regime change without being in favor of the regime, and to me that is the only morally justifiable position there.
He was asked about voting for the lesser of two evils.
I mean, I've never believed in sort of voting for the lesser of two evils and then holding them, holding their foot to the fire, because it actually never works.
There were awards given that night to Connecticut activists. The first was to the Dragonfly Climate Collective. Journalist Melinda Tuhus was the presenter, and Dan Fisher gave some remarks.
I'm just going to read this very brief thing. Between the Lines Radio News Magazine Democracy in Action Award, presented to Dragonfly Climate Collective for commitment and action confronting the root causes of climate change, October 8th, 2016. Say a word.
Thanks, Melinda. Congratulations to Between the Lines for your 25th anniversary. Congratulations to the other two groups that Melinda's going to announce. I just wanted to say something quick. I have this new paper by Dr. James Hansen with me that he released this past week. And I want to read the scariest sentence to you because I think it might surprise you. The scariest thing to me was not that the global temperature is now higher than it's been in 115,000 years, although it is. The scariest thing is not that within 50 years, sea level rise could make all of the world's coastal cities uninhabitable, but they could. The scariest thing is not that young people could one day be forced to geoengineer the entire planet, although they could. The scariest thing for me was the following sentence. If rapid phase down of fossil fuel emissions begins soon, most of the necessary CO2 extraction can take place via improved agricultural and forestry practices, including reforestation and steps to improve soil fertility and increase in its carbon content. In other words, the scariest thing to me was that it's not too late, that we don't have an excuse to say, there's nothing that we can do. It's a call for responsibility, that there are solutions, that these solutions are things we would want anyways: cleaner air, less time in front of screens, more trees, more gardens, taking inspiration from the Standing Rock Sioux, from people, indigenous people, the Zapatistas, the Kurds in Rojava that are implementing real solutions. And so I'm really honored to be working in this movement, and I think all of us in the Dragonfly Climate Collective are really grateful to have this opportunity we're humbled to be receiving this award with the other two recipients. Thank you.
Speaking of the growing climate catastrophe, the renowned author Christian Perenni will be talking about the connections between climate change and war at the Mark Schaefer Lecture in New Haven on Thursday, November 17th. See the website of Promoting Enduring Peace, peace.org, for more information. That's our program for today. See you next week at this time. I'm Stanley Heller, and this has been The Struggle.